All right, here we go. Welcome back, everyone, to the John Rondi Show. I'm here yet again with Gavin Adin, world champion powerlifter Gavin Adin. He's sleeveless for the 5th time in a row.
Have to.
World champion. Speaking of, you have a comp coming up.
Yep, national championship in 4 weeks, April 5th, 2025. Very excited. This will be my 3rd or 4th nationals now, which I'm pretty excited about. This is the most prepared I'll ever be. I'm the strongest I've ever been.
You said, "Oh, like you'll never be this prepared ever again."
Well, okay. So what I meant to say was, you know what?
Cut it.
Start it over.
So this is the most prepared you've been so far.
Yeah.
Why?
Absolutely.
Nutrition dialed in.
Yeah, nutrition's. No, you can't make me laugh because then people are gonna think I'm lying.
No. Go ahead.
All right. So yes, nutrition's dialed in, cardio's been dialed in, but most importantly, training and recovery has been dialed in. So sleep, stress management for the most part, all of that. And it's like anything else. Like as you're trying to master a craft, if you choose to never give up, at some point you're gonna figure some shit out. And so we've just figured a lot of shit out, man. So it's been years of. Are you so sorry?
I'm like, here he goes again. You can talk to me, man. I'm a really good friend. This isn't a random podcast. You don't have to get motivational on me, dude. I heard him going, and I was like, no, draw him back in. No, all seriousness. I'm continue to be proud of you. Best of luck. And maybe I'll go this year. Where is it?
It's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, maybe I won't.
You definitely will not go. But it is a short flight. It's a short flight. If you guys are in the area, definitely check it out. It's going to be a crazy competition. The stage presence now for these national championships is huge. It's nothing like Sheffield.
Yeah,
Most people don't know what Sheffield is, but Sheffield is a international competition, best of the best, champions of champions. Yeah. I've been there twice, podiumed at the first one. It's an opportunity to set crazy world records. And when you're there, 2,500 people live, and then over 500,000 on stream. And so that's pretty insane. Obviously, world championships is televised internationally, Olympic Channel, all that stuff. Nationals doesn't compare to that. But in terms of the energy and where it's getting, the environment, the location, it's getting there. So it's still going to be a lot of fun. Lots of competitors, lots of battles in all the different weight classes. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to hear more and learn more about Gavin Adin, check out his page, Gavin Adin, on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok.
And TikTok is GA Training. There's the unfortunate underscore between Gavin and Adin on Instagram. I know it's terrible, dude. I got to find a way to pay this guy off.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Who the fuck has that handle? We'll figure that one out. Well, so today actually isn't about Gavin. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I don't know if you knew that, but we're going to be addressing debunking and talking about hot takes in the fitness and wellness space, right? So I have a couple here listed, and hopefully you know and have insight on your answers with some sort of backing of why you're saying what you're saying, okay?
Yeah, we're going to rip through it.
Let's fucking rip, dude. First one up is going to be being sore means you're getting stronger/bigger.
Ooh. So no, definitely not necessarily true. And like you can use soreness as a good indicator of your training, so the stress that you're inducing, but especially like in the strength context, a lot of times soreness actually has nothing to do with it. And you actually want to avoid soreness because the soreness really just comes from like enduring tons of stress. So your body is going to adapt to a stimulus, and ideally the stimulus you present is going to elicit the exact adaptation you want. So for example, if I'm prepping for a national championship and I'm a powerlifter, yeah, it would be cool to get super jacked, get super big. But if my number one goal is to win nationals, I need a really good squat, bench, and deadlift. So that's the adaptation I'm looking for. Yeah. That doesn't require muscle soreness. So I will get stronger with my training despite not getting sore or being sore all of the time.
Got it. So how about bigger if you're a bodybuilder?
I would definitely argue that muscle soreness is a great indicator of stress on the tissue. So, if your muscles are sore, and I don't mean like hurt. There's a difference between being hurt and achy and then like your actual muscles are sore. So if you're genuinely sore, the chances that you trained hard enough to elicit that adaptation, which is to get bigger, the chances of that happening are pretty high, right?
Right.
I would say the chances of that happening are higher when you're sore versus when you're not sore. However, just because you're not sore doesn't mean that that's not happening.
I guess it's hard to know if you're not getting sore that you are progressing in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends. It depends on your training. It depends on how long you've been training too. And definitely like what phase of training you're in as well. So like, for example, I could make 30% of my 1 rep max feel really heavy, and I could get really sore from that, right? Sure. But will I get a lot out of that? Probably not, despite feeling sore as a result of it. Yeah. Whereas if I'm working with 70% of my max, get the same feeling, so same degree of soreness and all of that, and I'm probably going to yield more benefit from that work than I would have with the 30%. So it really just depends. But yeah, just because you're sore doesn't mean that you're, or sorry, just because you don't feel sore doesn't mean that you're not getting bigger. You're not getting bigger. And especially because every muscle group is different. Every person is different. Some people are genetically gifted in certain areas, and some people don't think about what I'm thinking about.
I didn't say anything. Continue, please.
But long story short, depending on individual differences, man, like that's going to change. Usually smaller muscle groups just require less time to recover.
Right. Dude, you hear that? Yeah, dude. It's terrible. It's so bad. How do you think I feel fucking sitting in this room and hearing somebody getting back shots by a steel pipe? Anyway, we'll ignore the sound in the background here. Follow-up question to that one. Do you train a sore muscle? You personally?
Oh, that's a great question, dude. How come you've never asked me that before?
I should do this for a living. Holy shit.
No, that's a great question. So in short, if
I know. It's so bad. It's so bad. Can you hear it? No?
Okay, I'm gonna try and keep a straight face. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm having too much fun.
We're having a blast in here.
Okay, so the question was soreness. And you were asking...
I asked, should you train a muscle if it's sore?
Yeah. Okay. So it's, like I said, it's a great question. It really just depends on your training goals. If you're like me, you have a competition to prepare for. Chances are, unless you're hurt, you're actually injured, you're trying to rehab something, you kind of have no choice, right? Now, you might adjust certain training variables to help make sure that you are prepared for the stuff that matters, like your primary movements, but you have to train. And so you can't just not show up in a way. Let's say, so that's for the context of
right,
you have something to train for.
Yeah.
If you don't necessarily have a clear objective that you have to show up for and you kind of have no choice, you've committed to, then do you have to train when you feel sore? No. Is it smart to? It could be. Like a lot of times you're going to be sore and it will not impact your performance. And a lot of times it actually might be beneficial to train through that soreness. The last thing you'd want to do though is you don't want to rush the recovery process. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you train your legs really, really hard on Monday. And the next day you feel pretty good, but you're kind of feeling it. You're starting to feel a little sore. You go to train your legs again on Wednesday, but you're going to do the same exact workout. But by now, because of your DOMS effect, the delayed onset muscle soreness, you're like really feeling it. Can you go train? Yes. But is that the best thing that you could do? No.
Right.
You should probably push it back because that means that your body needs a little bit more time to recover.
Sure.
Where people go wrong is the type of training they do and how aggressive they are with that training in all the ways that you would prescribe it when they are that sore. So just to kind of build on that example, you train really hard Monday, legs. 2 days later, you go in to train again. You're still really, really sore. You do the same exact workout. You try and use the same exact loads and you go just as hard. That you're probably going to get hurt.
Gotcha.
Right? Yeah. A lot of people could probably relate to this. You ever go into the gym, you're sore, but you're also tight. Like your muscles feel really, really tight. It almost feels like you're not hydrated or something, right? You feel like you're going to strain something. Yeah, you don't want to push that. But if you went in and you did something much lighter, maybe worked different parts of your lower body that you didn't work on, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So you can still move. You can still do shit. You just have to be careful, you know?
Sure. So either splitting a leg day from like, let's say the back of your legs to the front of your legs, you're going to do twice a week, or more of like a strength versus hypertrophy programming.
I wouldn't even look at it like that, bro. I would approach it purely from a recovery perspective.
Got it.
Because recovery is going to be what creates. So the stimulus is what your body's going to adapt to. The recovery period is what actually allows your body to adapt to the stimulus.
Yeah, I understand.
So you have to prioritize the recovery, because if you don't, it doesn't matter how much or how little you throw at your body. You just don't get any time for that adaptation to occur.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you prioritize recovery, everything else will kind of fit in. So the best example I could give here is, let's say you're a busy guy. So like someone like yourself, you've got a social life, you've got multiple businesses, you do jujitsu, and then you also train, right? Now, if you were to just think about, okay, when should I train? When would be the best to train? Well, there's an unlimited number of answers to that. But if you start with, what does my lifestyle allow? Yeah. What does my work life allow? My social life? Then after all those constraints, you think about, okay, based on my schedule, here's what I can recover from. I'm going to train 3 days a week and we're going to start there and we can figure it out after.
Yeah.
That's a better approach than, again, thinking like, okay, I need to hit this multiple times per week and I need to do this. And if I'm sore here, then I can't, you don't even have to worry about it like that.
So long story short, it's not the worst thing in the world to train sore, but don't necessarily overtrain if you're constantly not allowing yourself enough time to recover.
Yeah, overtraining is absolutely, this is a good little myth buster too. Overtraining is absolutely real. Like I know people who think like it's completely fake.
Yeah, roll right into that
not
one.
fake at all.
Okay, so the next question is going to be, is overtraining is a myth?
Yeah, the idea of overtraining is, so like, okay, think about a marathon runner, right? I know people, they're just fucking insane. They like to run marathons. I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
I do not understand
dude.
Their training is really, really intense, right? What's even more intense is the actual fucking marathon themselves, right? So very few athletes I talk to actually run marathons in their training.
Yeah.
So the marathon day, that's what is it? It's 26 miles, right?
26.2 or something.
26.2. That's a lot. They are destroyed after that. Now imagine if they went in the next day and tried to do the same thing or even run 3 miles. Yeah. They can barely walk after the marathon. Right. So although people say, well, that's the competition, whatever. It's like, but what if that was your training? Like, what if you were prepping a 100-mile race or something like that, right? So maybe if that was part of your training, would you be able to do that? No. Yeah. And if you tried, you'd probably hurt yourself even more than you already have. So this idea that like you can't do too much, is total bullshit. And the problem too is overtraining, people think it's just a volume base. Like, oh, there's no way you're working so hard that, you can't go back and zoom next day and work just as hard. Fine, but try doing that with maximum loads now. Yeah. So we can also overtrain with maximum loads. So like a lot of the old school like Russian strength training methods, they used to have you.
So you were saying
overtraining. Yeah. So a lot of the old like Bulgarian methods, Russian methods, you would end up in a program. I think it was called the Smolov Squat Junior program. I think I ran this like back in college. It was basically you squat every single day.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's brutal. If you're a beginner, maybe you can survive it. But when you're at my level, I'm not trying to gas myself up, but just objectively, once you are squatting 750 plus pounds, you cannot do that because the percentages, the way it breaks down, it's so much load, objective load. Your body can only handle so much so often. So even from that perspective, there's overtraining. Even if I only did one set of squats every day, that's all I did. It's not a lot of work, right? Almost no volume at all. But if every single day it was a 750-pound squat, I guarantee you by the end of the week, I'd be destroyed. There's just no way.
You wouldn't make it 7 days.
I don't think I would make it 7 days.
Well, that's actually interesting you say that because people probably think the opposite, but the more experienced and stronger you get, you actually need more time to recover, right? So like, for example, if you're going to do like a German volume training and 10 sets of 10, I think like 80% of your max, like you said, if it's a first day in the gym, you could probably handle that. If you tried doing that today, 80% of your max, 10 reps, 10 sets, could you make it one workout? Maybe. Are you doing it in 2 days? There's no fucking way you're going to be able to recover. And then it goes back to like the Mike Mentzer style. He worked out one every 4 days. And it wasn't like he would train and then retrain the same muscle group. He would train like, let's say arms and chest Monday and then wait till like Thursday, Friday to train legs. So he's only hitting a muscle group once a week and he's growing, and there's factors that come into play, whether he was on, gear and meth. Like you're not bringing yourself to that absolute extreme failure like he was, because you probably can't do it sober. But the point is, the stronger and more mature you get in lifting, the more time you're going to need off. And it's going to be way more practical to actually overtrain when you're more seasoned.
Well, the way that I look at it too is the smaller variables matter more when you become advanced. Yeah. Because you can get away with less. So, but even someone like, so we could take those two extremes, right? This idea of like overtraining and then completely like hypothetically speaking, undertraining like Mike Mentzer, right? We have literature that talks about all of this stuff. And the basics of it is hit a muscle group as frequently as you can while recovering as best you can. Is essentially it, right? Yeah. So what that ends up breaking down to, especially if you're thinking about like in a given week, most people, they look at their microcycle week to week as a 7-day cycle, right? Most people aren't training like 8 days and then 9-day cycle and switching it up. So if that's the case, then it's pretty simple. It's like, how much time do I even have to train to begin with, right? And let's say you're like me, you dedicate pretty much your whole life to being the best in the world at what you do in a weightlifting context. So I technically have all the time I would need, right? And even then I still have a constraint. So if I have to, I bench 4 times a week, I squat twice, I deadlift twice, and so I train 6 days a week, right? So that's a lot. Most people don't even train like that much. And the way that we spread out the volume, like it all kind of makes sense for me.
bench 4 times a week.
Yeah, and it really helps. It really works.
Really?
Yeah, 100%.
So hypothetically, I mean, just would you ever try to push that threshold to like 5 times a week if you're noticing a difference?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I'll do anything that's within ethical bounds. Yeah, 100%.
That's crazy that you're able to recover from something like that.
Well, yeah, because the volume is spread out, and we're not, so like, okay, the best way I could break it down is like, if you were to max out every day that you go to bench and you bench 4 days a week, yeah, it's probably not going to go too well. So then let's pull that back. You start maxing out 3 times, and one of those times you pull back a lot. Okay, that's still not great, but it's better than the previous. Then pull it all the way back down to where you have one day that's dedicated to basically top end single, and then you have some heavier back downs, and that's it. But the rest of the week, you're accumulating volume or building a skill or doing something that's not top end, right? Well, you can absolutely recover from that. Yeah. And again, every movement is different. Every person is different. So for example, if you're super well leveraged for a deadlift, right? You see a lot of these kids that weigh like 150 pounds soaking wet. They've got long ass arms and they can deadlift over 800 pounds, right? But they can't squat over 6. So that's really common. But they're just using their levers really, really well. Mm-hmm. And so they could probably recover from deadlift volume really, really well. Whereas someone like myself, I need to use a lot more of my raw raw strength and actual muscle tissue to deadlift. So I'm going to get beat up from deadlifts way more. But my squats don't fatigue me nearly as much because I'm better built for them. Whereas their squats would fatigue the shit out of me.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's more like individualized training and understanding your body and also your lifestyle too. Like you mentioned, you're a world champion powerlifter. This is your life, right? Yeah. Like, so the average human and the guy that likes to go out on a Saturday night or maybe a Friday night, and you understand like, okay, I can't schedule and program a really hard leg day on Saturday morning because I know I'm going to be going out. These are factors you have to kind of, you have to factor those in and not lie to yourself. Like if this is the lifestyle you're going to live and you're going to be a little more dehydrated over the weekend, then either make up for it on the days prior or understand like this has to be a rest day for me.
Yeah, I've found that like the costs for what I want, they always seem tenfold. Like in my head, I think like, okay, to become a world champion, it's going to take X when actually it takes 100X. Yeah. And that's really fucking annoying. But in almost everything I do, that's what I find. So like, look, if you're serious about a training goal, especially prioritize it. Everything else will map out and make sense. I prefer to go top down approach because when I go top down, it's basically reverse psychology, right? It's reverse engineering. It's this idea of, okay, if I know where I'm trying to go, I can then find the best route as opposed to starting here, thinking about where I want to go and trying to just explore different routes until I get there.
Got it.
So yeah, I think that 9 times out of 10, you have some leeway. You have a lot of leeway with your training in terms of whether or not you're going to find success with a particular program, training style, whatever. It's probably not that deep until you get to a certain level.
Yeah, how much you care about it. Yeah. So overtraining is indeed possible. Cardio kills your gains.
No. I mean, it can. Actually, it's kind of like 50-50, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, so like I do cardio, but the type of cardio I do kind of supplements my training. So there's a lot of benefit to getting your steps in. So getting like I think around 10,000 steps or more is really good for overall like life. Yeah. Like it's huge. I live a very sedentary lifestyle. I work from my laptop. I film, so for me, it's tough to get those steps in. So I have to implement that. Yeah. So my cardio is usually zone 2, steady state, incline treadmill. I'm walking for 20 to 40 minutes most days. If I have to cut down in weight, that's a very like minimally invasive way to do it, right? In addition to obviously changing up my actual food consumption amount. Now, if I started doing hill sprints, that would probably eat into my training. Now, would that completely destroy me? Maybe, depending on my split, but it's definitely not going to help my training because you have to think about it from the goal down, right? Top down. So if my number one goal is squat, bench, deadlift, what are the best things I could do to improve my squat, bench? Well, I got to squat, I got to bench, and I got to deadlift. What comes next? Well, what accessories can I do to supplement that? Great. And then what comes next? By the time you get down to something like a hill sprint, I mean, you've burned 24 hours in a day and all your recovery resources. So it's not optimal, right? So it's not, there might be a time when you would do that, but it ain't going to be 8 weeks out from a meet. And so it's kind of like that. You have to think about how far you are out from or not how far you are out, but think about your training goal and how cardio would relate to it. What I will say is that if you are doing like long distance running and stuff that is basically the opposite of what strength training is, and you're just training different systems, yeah, you're going to get almost like a directly opposite result because you're telling your body two different things.
I think that's the point that people are trying to get across. Yes, for you and your cardio, the zone to steady state is probably not going to be killing your gains. But these hybrid athletes that are running 10, 15 miles and then trying to lift and then trying to eat them, your body's a furnace. Like there's no way your body's putting on the optimal amount of muscle because like you said, you're signaling to it, I don't want to have muscle on me. You like to run 10, 15 miles. Well, muscle is holding you back. It's slowing you down.
Yeah.
Why would your body keep those quote unquote gains if you're telling it not to?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many variables that come into this that make it so easy to see that like too much of anything is going to impact your ability to perform in anything else. It's no different than literally anything else. Like the way I like to look at it is you're in school and you're taking, usually on average, you're taking like 5 subjects, let's say at a time in a given semester, right? So that's okay when everything's general. Yeah. But once you start to specialize, that becomes really fucking difficult because not only is the material super complex and it just requires more time to solve one problem, but on top of that, you need to be so in it to totally master it that you don't have time or energy for anything else. Yeah. So it's exactly like that in training, right? The more that you divvy up your resources, you're just going to become less effective in the 1 or 2 things that you want to be effective in. So like those hybrid athletes that's super hot right now, that's dope. They're never going to be great at everything. That's just a fact. Like I'm not trying to talk shit. It's like CrossFit. Like CrossFitters are fucking awesome. Like they can have that title, fittest on earth or whatever, but they're never going to be a world champion in any one of those disciplines.
How could they be?
It's just not possible.
There's no way like you're training
even
for
on drugs,
thing.
they wouldn't be able to.
There's no way. I mean, you said you're divvying up like your resources, right? That's a good analogy because again, like even from an opportunity cost standpoint, right? If you're running and training or trying to lift at the same time, there's going to be an overlap. There's going to be a day where you have to choose one over the other. So if you choose running, yeah, you're not signaling to your body to keep muscle on, and you're also signaling the opposite, like we mentioned before, like burn it off. The only way to keep muscle on is to give it a stimulus to keep it on, which would be weightlifting, and you're taking a day off the gym because you have to go run.
Well, it's the stimulus, but it's also the recovery deficit, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're running, that's less time that you could have been spending recovering.
Right.
So all that stuff just eats into it. So that's why cardio can kill your gains. It just depends on how much and what type you do. Like anything anaerobic is probably actually going to promote, I think, a lot of muscle growth, like muscle hypertrophy, just because of like the nature of anaerobic stuff, especially like HIIT stuff. Like hill sprints are fucking hard. Like you have to. So that's one thing. But yeah, I mean, when you're running 5 miles, 10 miles, and you're doing that every day, you're absolutely right. Your body sees that as like, yo, if we don't lose weight and make this easier, we're going to die. And the reality is muscle is denser than fat. So there's that. But then there's also just the aspect of, can I even maintain my ability to perform in weight resistance training and adapt to that while also recovering for and adapting to this running thing?
We just had my doctor on the podcast and we talked about Ozempic. Like, so same thing, Ozempic is killing your gains. And he's like, Ozempic is not killing your gains directly. It's not like it's saying, I'm going to eat only your muscle. It is, but the reason is because you're starving yourself. And like you said, muscle is quicker to burn and easier to burn for your body when it goes into starvation mode. If it's in starvation mode, you're telling yourself, hey, I may not eat for another week, right? If we're primal, I have to keep on as much fat as possible. Yeah. And the first thing that has to go is the muscle. So the only way to tell your body to keep muscle on would be going to the gym. So again, it's the same principle. You're not eating enough, you're doing too much cardio, and you're not telling your body to keep the muscle on.
It's the same, not to segue too harshly, but it's the same thing like that common trope of, girls are on the treadmill because they want to get skinny and guys in the weight room because they want to get bulky. It's like, it's exactly that. Right. The weight resistance is your way of telling your body like, hey, we need to build muscle. Yeah. We need tissue. And if you don't include that, whether you're in a caloric deficit or a bulk or whatever, then you're not going to get that adaptation. Yep. Your body just doesn't see the need for it. It's literally like anything else in life. If you want to maintain or create some sort of new skill or adaptation, you need a stimulus to do that. It's literally that simple. So in the gym, like you said, if you don't give your body any reason to build muscle, and you're giving it all the reasons to burn calories, I mean, why would it build muscle or maintain muscle? It has no reason to. So yeah, 100%. I mean, it's tricky too, because once you get into like athletes and like GPP and stuff like that, it's a little bit different. But for the general population, yeah, you at the very least, if you like to do cardio and you don't want it to kill your gains, you need to weight train. That's like the first step. Then next would be high protein, because those two things will act as nice buffers. And the last piece would be really making sure you're replenishing your glycogen after cardio and stuff like that. Those 3 things will definitely help you maintain, maybe even build muscle if you are heavy on the cardio side. Mm-hmm. But if you only do cardio and you don't really do much weight resistance training at all, don't expect it will kill your gains.
Got it. Well, another great segue for the females out there, for all 5 of you that are watching this, lifting weights.
What the fuck is a
my
female?
mom, Heidi, my sister. Yeah, actually no, my sister doesn't watch. Right. Mostly for the females, lifting weights will make you bulky.
No, not in the way that you're phrasing it. No, not in the way that you mean it. Yeah.
Right.
No, not gonna happen.
Reasons why it would be much harder for a girl to get bulky versus a man.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have a PhD in exercise science and nutritional sciences or even just basic, human biology. But men work really hard to build muscle. Most of us weight train to do so. We know that pushing your muscles to some degree of failure in the gym, meaning, in other words, just training hard, right? So introducing that weight resistance will build muscle. We have hormones that allow us to do that really well, testosterone being one of them, right? So that right there is something that we can look at and be like, okay, cool. There's a reason why maybe women might not be able to get as big or as bulky naturally as a man without, what would it be? Exogenous testosterone, right?
Right.
So that right there is proof that you really can't get bulkier than a guy, let's say, weight resistance training. So at least we know that. So then we could take it another step and say like, okay, cool. Well, let's look at the mechanisms of what you are doing to achieve whatever training goal you have. Does it make sense? So a lot of girls, I think, who have this idea that, okay, if I touch a weight, I might get way too jacked and way too strong or whatever. They think that it happens super fast, and it doesn't. They think that they're not in control of that process. Like literally the moment they start lifting, it's just, they're going to blow up like a balloon. That's not the case. And the other problem is they think that the training that they're doing outside of that is going to get them the results that they want.
Right.
So again, top down, if we look at the results that they want, they actually like any like sort like cardio, pure cardio, that's not going to get them the results that they want. If they want to be toned, if they want to build muscle, especially in their lower body, like you have to build the muscle. You have to give your body a reason to take on that shape. And so, so you would look at it from the perspective of like, okay, well, is what you're doing working to begin with? And if it's not, then it might be possible that it's the wrong way and we can try a different approach. But in short, 100%, it will not make you super jacked and bulky.
Right. I guess there are differences in males and females based on a couple of different things, right? Like hormones and how you would train one over the other. I believe that you normally would train a guy closer to their max, 1 rep max, and a girl's can adapt to more of a higher volume program or whatever it may be. Like aside from those intrinsic, the anatomy is the anatomy, right? To build a bicep, we both have to do the same thing. But I think there's a standard of what quote unquote bulky is for a girl versus a man, right? So if I got to the standard of a bulky female, that's probably a pretty frail man, right? If I had that same muscle mass on me. I think that's the difference, right? Like we talk about newbie games all the time. A girl is normally going to be a beginner in the gym. So she may notice a bicep vein and be like, oh my God, I'm getting way too bulky. Or I started taking creatine and now I feel like I'm lethargic. So maybe it's just a level of what they want, and then they start getting nervous because they're going down a path. But like you said, you're going to hit this like threshold of what you think is bulky. You're not going to reach like this next level of now looking like a man because you kept doing the same, right? You kept doing the same thing for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing too is like, aside from the genetic differences, again, training goals dictate the training system. The training system will elicit the desired adaptation, right? So like for example, the way a female powerlifter trains, they'll start to look a certain way, but it's completely based on their training. Like you can go to the training and be like, oh yeah, this makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like my waistline and most female powerlifters' waistlines get thicker over time, get wider over time. But it's because we're lifting heavy ass fucking weights. So our body has no choice but to build its ability to be stable. And so that's just the way it is. If you don't want that, or if you don't like that, and let's say you weren't born with that type of genetic, then that's totally fine. You can go ahead and just train in a different way. And that's why like runners look a certain way, sprinters look a certain way. And so the idea is you look at the training system should give you a pretty good estimate as to what you'll look like or feel like or perform like once you finish that system or as you've progressed through that system. That's usually a great way to look at it. And when it comes to like weight resistance training, I mean, especially if you're doing it naturally, it takes years to stack on muscle. It really does. And also too, like, it's like we talked about before, you have to look at what the alternatives are. And sometimes if the alternatives, it's almost like you're taking a test, right? You don't know the right answer, but you know the wrong ones. It's kind of like that. It's like, okay, cool. Like I can cross that off. I can cross that off because this is not going to get me to where I want to go. So let me try this. I will say for sure, if you were to spend 3 months on a semi-hard weight training regimen, so you're going to train 3 times a week, you're going to push yourself kind of hard in the gym for 45 minutes a day, right? You're going to recover well. Try for 3 months. I can guarantee you will not get nearly as bulky as you think you're going to get. So no fear there. Give it a shot and then make that decision.
Right. That's a good point. So lifting in general is not going to make you bulky per se. However, following a specific program that is literally meant to make you bulky, yes, you will probably get bulkier than you once were.
You will build, right. You will build in the areas that you're trying to build in, given that the system is right for you. What I will say is weight training is super fucking important for women, especially older women. Yeah. I mean, bone density, everything. It's really, really, really important. And I really hope that most especially women don't shy away from at least dabbling in it, because I think A, it's a lot of fun. B, there's so much more to training when you are also trying to perform. And I think that, like, you know, there's a societal stigma around muscle, and I think it's getting way better now that we have a fitness culture that we have, where like I feel like every girl just goes into the gym and films now, and now has like 300,000 followers on Instagram. So I feel like it's changing. So but for a while, dude, like, yeah, girls just didn't touch weights. Period.
5 years ago, like, honestly, it's been very recent, like as literally the last 5 years post COVID, this whole thing, how many fitness girls were there in the space, and now they're all over the place. Yeah. And you notice, like, you got a girl with a little bit of muscle and a pretty face and a big old butt, and now she's got millions of followers. Yeah. Yeah. But the building muscle tissue is definitely really important. And like I said, I think it's something that you're not going to get super jacked, super bulky. You're not going to look like, even me, like, I'm a natural athlete, and especially when I'm not actually training, like just sitting here as a regular person, like I don't look like a fucking meathead, like super juiced up bodybuilder. Okay. If you say so, buddy. Pull up your shirt. No, all good points. So thank you for that. Another fantastic segue. It's like I planned this, dude. It's so weird. So weird. Lighter weights with higher reps tones muscle. There's no such thing as like toning muscle, so far as I know. Explain what you would consider a toned muscle to be. So I think toning is just like this idea of like spot reduction of fat in a way. It's like, oh, I kind of want to see a little bit more curve there. I essentially want to be leaner. That's basically what we're saying. Right. So what I hear most people say, even this is across like all, like men and women, old, young, something, especially when I was doing in-person training back in college, I would always hear like, I don't want to get too bulky. I don't want to build muscle. I just want to get toned. So what they're telling me is they just want to basically like get leaner, just lose weight. But what they don't realize is if they don't weight train, they're just going to get what we call like skinny fat. So your body's not going to have any muscle. So you're not actually going to have any tone. You're just going to be like less fat, but all fat, more or less, right? And so it's going to give you a very weird look as compared to like actually having some muscle on, like your body. Yeah. So you, when you say tone, what you're really saying is you need to develop the body, and that requires weight resistance training. Right. And by the way, like weight resistance training doesn't have to be like super heavy squats, benches, and tons of leg presses and stuff. Like it could totally be kettlebell workouts. It could totally be like plyometric stuff. It has to be a resistance that's greater than the body itself. So that's easy. Like that's simple. So you're signaling to the body, again, like we talked about, either I think, again, when you say I want to get more tone, what you're saying is I want my body to have not less fat in general, a lower body fat percentage. So that body fat percentage can come from two things. Number one, either your body fat dropping or your muscle mass increasing, right? So like those sort of titrate back and forth, and people think it's just about losing fat. But like you said, if you're losing fat and muscle at the same time, you're probably gonna look worse than you once did, and you didn't realize. Yeah. And now you look back, you're like, oh man, I lost 5 pounds on the scale. You won't be as healthy either. Right. You look worse. Either. Yeah. And what I will say, and this kind of also lends itself into like the women getting bulky off of lifting weights. The truth is this: if you train the muscle and you introduce heavier and heavier or harder resistances, it will build. Like it will develop. That's its job. It will respond to that. But that's really cool because now you can manipulate the stimulus you present. So for example, if you are someone who doesn't want to get super jacked up, you don't care about having tons of muscle tissue, but you still want to be fit and you still want to have that toned look, you can do calisthenic training. And as long as you're in a caloric deficit,
you're going to get leaner over time, and you will be developing some degree of muscle. Now, will you get super jacked and built up from calisthenics? No, because you're just, at some point, your body gets so well adapted to handling that weight, which is your body weight, that it's not going to get bigger and better from that, right? Yeah. But that's okay if that's your goal. However, of course, if you didn't do any of that and you didn't challenge the muscle in any way, and all you did was introduce some degree of a caloric deficit, that's going to show. So yeah, when people say they want to get toned, they just mean leaner. Now, to answer the other half of that, light weights, yeah, you could do that with light weights, but remember that, you need to grow. You need to get better. You need to give your body a reason to grow. And so if you want your muscle tissue to grow into shape, and you're introducing the caloric deficit to get leaner, to give you that toned look, you can't really do that with light weights for too long, because like I said, at some point your body gets so adapted to it, it's not hard enough for it.
I think anecdotally, what I could speak to in regards to like light weights versus medium versus really heavy, I think it comes down to like your mental capacity to withstand the workout, right? So let's assume I'm talking about higher reps and lightweight, and I'm talking about like shoulder raises and sets of 50, right? What's giving out first? Is my muscle actually getting fatigued, or is my cardio giving out, or am I mentally getting drained? Am I in the gym for way too long and I'm like, the real difference of the stimulus between rep 40 and rep 43 probably isn't that much, but mentally I gave out because I'm like, I got bored and I feel the burn. Okay, I'm good. Whereas if I'm touching something closer to my 1 rep max, say in the range of 5 to 8, I'm going to a failure because I know I literally cannot do anymore. And for me, it locks me in a bit. When I have heavy weight on the bar, you're literally forced to truly lock in and give it everything you have. Whereas again, you go that higher rep range, yeah, you're gonna start increasing your anaerobic, I guess, capacity. But I may not ever touch a threshold of weight that I actually needed to get stronger. And then you stop the workout and you're not sore the next day and you're not growing. You're like, why did I not grow? You may have never given, like you said, yourself a stimulus to actually grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why having a good training system is really important too. Yeah. I mean, I will say the last thing on this is that like the most recent literature I saw online from actually, I think it was Lane Norton. He had posted about it. Basically, they found that you can achieve the same amount of muscle hypertrophy, so muscle growth, muscle size, from light weights training to failure, medium weights training to failure, heavy weights training to failure. What matters most is that you're training to failure, so
right, exactly.
Pushing the fully exhausting the muscle. The problem with the light weights is that there's a heavy rate of diminishing return. So in other words, if you chose a weight that you could do 50 reps with, right, the chances of you really actually being able to do 60, super high. Yep. But if you chose a weight you could only do 8 reps with, the chances of you being able to do 15 with it, super low. And so that's why you usually hear people say like, okay, light weights is just not really worth it. But again, it's all based on the goals, man. Some people, like you just need a certain amount of weight training volume to maintain a certain amount of muscle mass as well. So if you're like, it's really just goals. It's completely goal dependent, but light weights won't get you toned. Technically, the calorie deficit is what will get you lean. And then you can use your weights to kind of create the shape that you want.
Understood. Yeah. More protein equals more muscle growth.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't even need to talk about that. Oh, that's a huge yes.
Okay, let me ask you, when you...
What about this one? I just seen it. They fed me propaganda. 40 grams of protein before bed will be way more beneficial for your protein synthesis or something.
Oh, I saw that too, actually, I think.
Yeah. Like, why? Because like right before growth hormones...
I don't know. I guess just right before sleep.
That's it.
Yeah.
Fix it up.
So do you, let's say like, okay, the concept of more protein equals more gains, right? There has to be a threshold to that number though. It's not like I can eat 500 grams of protein a day and now trigger and for whatever reason now my body's adding more muscle.
I mean, yeah, there's like a natural, I'm going to say limit to a degree of like what your body can like digest, use at any given time. And it would probably be really difficult to have 500 grams of protein in a day, especially if you're talking about normal eating habits, so having carbs and fats as well. So, yeah. But what I will say is that a lack of protein will limit muscle growth. So by nature, more protein, more muscle.
Up to a certain point.
Potentially. But we don't really know, I don't think. Like we used to think the anabolic window was a thing. That's coming out that's not really a thing anymore.
What would the anabolic window be?
Anabolic window is like if you don't get a certain amount of protein in within 30 minutes of your training, then that workout was a waste. That's complete bullshit. Even like we still debate the food that you consume, at what point is your body going to use that for which training session? Like we still debate that even.
Yeah.
So like that's a big one I found in my training. It's like, okay, so I have to maintain a certain weight for my competitions, right? I weigh 209 around. Right. I weigh 209.
Oh, really? Because we have a scale right here.
Right now.
Actually, I have a scale. We're going to put you on it in the camera. So.
Well, it's the middle of the day.
You're right.
And I had an espresso.
Sure. Yeah, I had a coffee. Come on.
I had some oxygen, please.
What's breathing today?
So I'm 209.6. I'm supposed to be 205 for this competition, right? So I have to like at least maintain my weight. So the biggest thing is it's like if I'm trying to, well, hold on a second. So the question was that we're really trying to answer is more protein
equals more gains.
And where were we going with that? Because I completely lost my train of thought.
My point was that there was a threshold to the amount.
You were actually 211.
Yeah, you're like, God, no. You're like, he's gonna bring out a scale soon. My point was that there has to be a threshold to the amount of protein that you can consume and still receive the benefit from. And you're kind of saying that there obviously is going to be a limit. We just don't necessarily know what that upper limit is. And then we talk about the anabolic window. And we used to think that you had to get protein in 30 minutes after your workout, or else it was a waste of a workout. Yeah. And that doesn't seem to be
right.
true.
And then the meals, right? Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So in my training, even I think about, so because I have to maintain a certain weight, some days I have like low carb days, some days I have high carb days, okay? Deciding which days are the high carb and low carb are really difficult because some days are super hard, intense training sessions, some days aren't. The average nutrition coach will tell you, and by average, I don't mean bad, but I just mean the average, typical, like the usual, the typical. They'll tell you on your hardest training days have the most carbs. Right. But does that really make sense? Because I train, even if it's the middle of the day, is my body able to use all of those carbs for that training session? Or is it really going to take a full 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever to digest all of it and then use it for the next one, right? Some people, I mean, when I first started training, people were telling me, no, about 2 days out from your hardest session, that's when you want to have the most carbs. So this stuff is still debated. And so, it's really tough to like say that. I don't think any of that truly matters. I think the number one goal is look at the amount of protein you should be getting in based on your body weight, get that in. Then you can start thinking about timing and you can start thinking about like optimizing that schedule. But if you are at the very least, for example, for myself, if I am at least getting in 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, that's okay. Wow. Regardless of the timing. We've even seen now too that I think there was a study, they basically said that 25 grams of protein after training versus 100 grams of protein after training, they saw better effect from the 100 gram. Really? And the idea is that there's no limit technically to the response you could get from having more protein. So we still are figuring this shit out. Yeah. So at the end of the day, bro, like you get in enough protein, you'll be able to recover. You'll give your body what it needs to, like I said, create that adaptation. And that's it. That's all you need to really worry about. That idea of there being like an upper limit, if there is one, it would be so difficult to touch that it's not even worth having the conversation over.
Yeah. What you will be able to touch, though, however, if you're new to this game, is the amount of protein your body can digest properly. You will notice a difference in how you feel if you eat way too much protein.
Really? Give me an example.
I shit terribly if I have too much protein.
Really?
Dude, if I have way too much, even if I had like, when I was really conscious of getting like 150 to like 200 grams of protein in my diet, number one, I didn't notice much of a difference in how I looked and how I felt maybe, but it was like, I couldn't, my stomach would hurt all the time. Maybe because I have Crohn's. My stomach would hurt all the time and I'd be shitting like 4 times a day.
Crohn's definitely has something to do with that.
Maybe it's something like that. Anyway, but yeah, that's something to factor in is the ability to, they say it's not necessarily how much protein you consume, it's how much you actually digest and process. So if you can't process dairy for some reason or red meat and you're eating a ton of fucking red meat and drinking milk and you feel like dog shit, well, like maybe it's time to maybe back down the protein or find a different source.
Yeah, that definitely matters a lot. And also too, there's different like quality of protein. Like protein from rice is different than the protein in steak, and the
amino acid profiles and all that good stuff. Yeah, we don't know enough about that. We're not doctors. What do we look like?
I just lift weights, brother.
That's all we do here, man. Last question of the day, or last whatever you want to fucking call this thing. Last myth. Sure, myth. Muscle turns into fat when you stop training.
Yeah, no. No, it doesn't turn into fat. You may lose muscle.
Right.
Your body doesn't have a reason to hold on to it. But what's really fucking cool about the human body is if you stopped training and like lost size, lost strength, the rate at which you'd gain it back if you resumed training is like twice as fast.
Really?
than it took you to get it. Yeah.
So let's assume that like you are what 10 years of training. How long have you been training?
At this point,
Probably 10.
Let's go 12 to 13.
Yeah. If you took off let's say you did not touch a weight for a month.
Yeah.
What do you think your body would look like, and what do you think your strength would be like if you got back in the gym that day?
Like didn't do any training.
Did not touch a weight.
Oh God. So feeling, I'd probably feel super flat, super weak, right? In terms of looks, I'd probably look a little bit flatter.
Yeah.
And depending on how I was eating, would either look more like we talked about, like skinny fat, or if I was actually on point with my diet, I could actually look even better because I'd be much leaner, less inflammation, like all that stuff. And then in terms of performance, when I come back, the tricky part is, I've never really taken that much time off. I would say the first 4 weeks, so the first block back would be pretty tough, but at my level, bro, like especially my body weight, squatting 405 will always be easy, and benching 315 will always be easy. Deadlifting 600 will always be easy. So it's like those numbers I'll probably 100% be able to have. And then within a week or two, I'll be right back. Will I be back at like a 750 pound plus squat and, 500 plus pound bench and all that? Probably not it would probably take me like 3 training cycles, but.
Do you think that's more mental or physical?
It's both. But your body needs to adapt, period. The mental side, where I find the mental side really limits people is on the top end, strength wise.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, on the top end for sure.
Because that's a reason. There's a reason why substances like Adderall are illegal in your sport, is because it turns off that fear. I mean, for me, I've only taken it one time lifting, and I didn't have that little voice in my head that said, you may not be able to do this. You kind of just grab the weight, and if you could do it, you did it, and if you can't, you can't. So I would assume that after a month, your mind going into that workout is nothing like it was when you're training consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it kind of depends too, right? Like what kind of training you're doing. Like at the end of the day, like if I'm going back to some basic bodybuilding stuff, like it's not going to be what's there to be mentally distraught about. If I'm trying to compete in a given sport and resume like at my previous competitive level, that's going to be pretty difficult if I don't at least give myself time.
Sure.
But again, mentally, if you go into the process understanding and embracing where you are in that moment, giving yourself a little bit of grace in that moment, and understanding that this is part of the process. It's not that I'm behind. I'm right where I need to be. This is part of the process. This is step one. You'll be totally fine. I think where people get messed up is they shit on themselves too much over it, right? Like that whole thing about body dysmorphia and I've lost, like, dude, you get sick for a week and you don't go to the gym, you already start hating yourself. You're like, oh, I feel like shit, I look like shit, I lost all my gains, blah, blah. You're back after a week and you're literally right back to where you were, or you're better, and you forget about it, right? So that stuff can be difficult to avoid. That just comes with time. So I know myself well enough to know, like, bro, trust me, this will be fun. And like, it's not like I'm talking to my ass either. Like, we have the literature to show that the rate at which you will regain your strength and muscle is absolutely faster than how long it took you, or the rate at which you gained it to begin with.
That's
when you first started.
Yeah, that's comforting to hear. I mean, now at this age, I've understood that, but like 5-10 years ago when you're young, I feel like starting out the gym, you are so afraid to miss a workout and take a week off if you're sick or on vacation or whatever it may be. You never actually give yourself the time to adapt or recover fully if you're constantly going every single day. And I do think that if you had to take time off, let's say you're again traveling or you got sick, and you give yourself that grace and you realize, like, number one, wait, I feel a little bit better. I'm not as sore. I can move my body, and holy shit, I look a little bit better. Maybe that's a signal to yourself. You're training, like we talked about before. Maybe you are overtraining and you're never really giving yourself time to recover properly and then hit it hard the next time. For me, especially now, I've noticed I train better at a 4-day split, right? I just recover better. I look better. I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't go through years of trying to lift every single day of my life, Yeah. I think it just takes maturity.
Well, and that's a great point that you brought up, and it's a good place to end too. Like the idea of overtraining as it relates to your mind. Because I think that is something that is way, way overlooked and underestimated. Like it's something that you don't take into account. It's so easy I feel like the best example for this is like bands. Like you ever like have an artist that you really enjoy listening to, and then they kind of just like fall off the face of the earth. Like either the lead singer leaves or they stop making music or whatever. And it's usually a band that you kind of grew up on as a kid.
Who are you thinking about?
I was thinking about Creed. I don't know if you know, everybody loves Creed, right?
I was thinking Bring Me the Horizon.
Yeah, Bring Me the Horizon, another one. And they kind of come back, but they never, it's kind of like that, dude. It's like they reach this point where you're like, you're finally there. And from the outside perspective, it's like, dude, he's killing it. And what takes them out is something completely irrelevant from the music itself, the one thing that they were always trying to create. And so as an athlete, a lot of times that happens. It's like you finally get yourself to this place, but mentally it's so hard to sustain. The challenges are greater and there is a lot more pressure, sure, but it's just the opportunity for burnout is so much greater as well. And so a lot of times I know a ton of, at least just in the strength world, strength athletes who they had to take 6 months off. They went on vacation. They spent more time with family. They did their thing, whatever. They came back and they became stronger than they were when they were competing previously. And a lot of it is that, because I will say this for sure, the body does follow the mind, and I do believe the mind follows the spirit. Most people don't take care of their spirit. So that's for a separate topic. But the mind itself, if you're not taking care of your mind, and if you're not at least aware of what can happen if you don't, then absolutely. Not only are you going to get to a point where you start to hit obstacles and walls that, like, truthfully, bro, like at my level, how do I get to a 550 pound bench press at 205 body weight naturally? Only like 1 or 2 people have ever done it, right? How do I get to an 800 pound squat at my body weight naturally? No one has done it. So it's like, these are questions that, do we even have the answer to this? Like, I have to be the pioneer here.
It out, right? That's
and mentally, you're doing that while living your life and trying to support and provide all this other stuff and competing against people trying to do the same fucking thing, just as talented, working just as hard. So yes, there's levels to it, but even at the local level of people just wanting to go to the gym to get better, it still exists there. So if your mind's not taken care of and you aren't following a routine that's sustainable over time, then yeah, absolutely, you may find yourself where you are overtraining and it has nothing to do with your body.
Dude, there's such a rabbit hole we could go down with, like, overstress mentally and cortisol levels and
dopamine, bro, all the social media
right?
Stuff,
100%. You're never giving yourself enough time. Like you said, you're never giving yourself grace to appreciate the body you're actually in. You're probably never going to see the body you want, and it's because of those stressors. Your body's going to hold on to fat as, again, as a fight or flight mode. It doesn't know that it's allowed to let it go. I think girls experience it all the time. Like, they're constantly pushing the pace of cardio and they're not lifting, and they look at themselves in the mirror and they're not happy, and they still struggle with the way that it's like this ongoing vortex they're stuck in. So the best point you brought up is that if you do have to take time off for whatever reason, give yourself that grace period of coming back and knowing that you will get back / better than you once were.
Yeah. My suggestion for people is, like, if I were a performance coach and I had somebody, whether they're an executive or they're an athlete, the system stays the same. It's like, what's the number one goal right now? The number one goal is to continue making progress, right? Yeah. We can't just like let it all go, because we put a lot of work here. So option one is to create, you always want to start with small changes first. You don't want to make anything too drastic, but start creating some small changes that might allow for this. So maybe instead of training 6 days a week, you train 5. Maybe if you're training 5, start training 6. It's just all these little small changes, right? But then the next step is, okay, we need to take a step back here. Where is the deficit? And if it is like a burnout thing, if you find that you're super stressed, you're not getting to where you want to go, my number one recommendation, like, and I'm talking about crash out status, like I'm ready to throw it all away. I call it like a maintenance mode. So my maintenance mode is, for me, I train 6 days a week. I train very seriously. I can do 3 days. Like, that to me is not hard at all. That would be enjoyable pretty much, right? In fact, if I went down to 1, I would actually start to hate myself a little bit, and then I'd really crash out, right? For other people, if they're training 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever, what's their maintenance mode? Is it 1 day a week? Is it 15 minutes twice a week? Find your maintenance mode, go right to that. Just, that's your grace, because it's really important to not lose the stimulus altogether, right? You have to maintain it, because there's a lot of mental benefits from that, but also obviously physical, but it also allows you to take that step back. So that's that balance. You never really want to just like cold turkey, call it a day, and then come back, because then you end up in these cycles, and you're in this negative feedback loop, because once you feel good about coming back, you feel bad about having left, right? And so that's why you need to make sure that you have what I call like a maintenance mode. If the small tweaks and changes don't work and we're going to crash out, we got to have, what's the minimum I can do to sustain this while I figure my shit out.
Right. So it feels like you never actually left.
You never left. And honestly, bro, like you actually never fucking left. Like you kept going. You kept doing exactly what you needed to do to make progress, because if you didn't revert back to that maintenance mode, you would have crashed out.
Right.
You would have 100% quit, and you would have hated yourself for it. You probably wouldn't have even come back. I can't tell you how many stories I've had of clients of mine, especially when I used to do one-on-one training, and people would say, dude, man, the only reason why I decided to work with a coach, it's not because I didn't know what I was doing. It's not because I wasn't getting results. It's because I just couldn't take it anymore. And I had no accountability.
Yep.
And part of a coach's job is it's to hold you accountable, but hold you accountable for you. Like, it's not about me. I'm doing this so you show up for you. Yep. And that's really, really important. And so, yeah, man, like it's 100% totally okay to have like a maintenance mode, revert back to that. And then you can build on that as you return, to what you were previously doing.
It happens to athletes a lot, I would assume.
Yeah.
Like you're so used to just every day grinding for a goal, and then your goal's over. You don't have a goal. You're like, well, I'm going to go get fucking fat.
Yeah, dude,
and you have to get back in the gym. I can't imagine. So, yeah, that was very informative, Gavin. You're a lot smarter than you look. So thank you for joining. Where can they find you?
YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and my website. So for the most part, across the board, everything starts with Gavin Adin. So YouTube is Gavin Adin, Instagram is Gavin_Adin, TikTok is GA Training, and then my website is GavinAdinTraining.com.
You should have brought the chalk.
Iron Claw? I actually have it in my car, but it's a pretty beat up bag. But we did just launch chalk, and people are fucking loving it. Dude.
Really?
You guys see these reviews on Amazon.
Good. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so that we'll put that description or the link in the description.
Yeah.
All right. That's it for today, everybody. Like, subscribe, share. Peace out.
Peace out.